You've slept overnight on a bed that's not grounded. From an evolutionary perspective, we were sleeping on the ground. You're in a room that's got air conditioning. Then you wake up and you brush your teeth with a fluoride toothpaste. It's all just paper cuts, paper cuts. You can bleed out from a million paper cuts.
Olivia Leslar is a doctor and stress expert who decodes how stress rewires the brain and body for better or worse health. Her mission is to turn our ancient survival response into a modern longevity superpower, giving you the science-backed tools to thrive under pressure.
How does your body, how does your mind perceive what is a threat to survival? It uses a threat detection system. And so how the threat detection systems perceive an input and then react to that input means that whatever it is that triggered it is a stress.
When you look at 2030, what do you see? What will the world look like?
That's actually a really sad question for me.
The future looks amazing, but also a little scary. If you, just like me, want to have an honest outlook of what the next chapter could look like and how best to prepare for that, I ask for one simple favour. Subscribe, so I can invite the brightest minds on this podcast and get those answers for both you and I. Enjoy the episode. Why does someone need to learn about psychoneuroimmunology?
First of all, let's just define it. Psychoneuroimmunology is that intersection point between psychology, nervous system, immunology, but also emotions, behaviors, sociology, endocrinology, hormones. Essentially, it's everything is connected to everything, not just within the body, but outside the body too. And everybody knows this, right? You know that your sleep is going to affect your work the next day. Your moods are going to affect your relationships. The type of food that you eat is going to affect how you perform in the gym. Everything is affecting everything else. And this bidirectionality offers patients and practitioners alike more levers to pull when it comes to trying to change behaviors or physiology or disease processes. So it's not that people need to learn about psychoneuroimmunology as such, because we all kind of instinctively know that it's true. But practitioners particularly need to start realizing that there is more than one tool or more than the limited number of tools that we're taught in medical school when it comes to trying to help patients. And we have to be looking outside of our limited lanes.
What I'm hearing from that is like we need to be far more holistic, because let's say a patient comes in and sees you or sees someone, and the obvious kind of thing of how it was done before was, oh, you're stressed because you work in a shit job or your boss is a dick.
Yeah.
Rather than actually looking at everything.
Yeah. Because not everybody can change their job. Yeah. Not everybody can change where they live. Not everybody can change, their shift work. So what else do we do? How else can we change your situation? In part, it's, using the other aspects of your life to mitigate whatever pressures or negative things are happening in one area that you want to focus on or you want to move the needle on. Mm. But then there are other aspects, acceptance, not resignation, right? But acceptance, reframing. There's so much that we can do to move that needle. And with so many complex conditions, with so many environmental inputs, with so many different discourse on social media causing confusion, I think we need to start being a little bit more self-compassionate, but also realizing, hey, we have options. We have tools. We'll find something that sings to you.
How, if you're working with someone, they've come in, their life's a mess, they have no idea where to start. Like, where do you start? What's the first point of call?
It's always in the history. If you give a patient enough space and time, they basically tell you what's wrong with them. This is taught to us in medical school, right? History. I've seen that we're relying on tests and wearables, by the way, more and more to tell us if something is wrong. And we already know from conventional medicine that is a bad idea. Because with emerging syndromes and other things which aren't necessarily already described in the medical literature, and we're getting these weird and wonderful things happening, and if it doesn't fit in the algorithm, patients have been told, it's in your head. It's anxiety. Get better sleep. Can't help you. Go see a psychiatrist. Like, that has to stop. And any iteration of that also has to stop. In other words, it cannot be that you're looking for the asterisk red result on a blood test before you go, okay, something's not right. The patient is in front of you saying something's not right. You start there. A good history, going back as far back as you can, trying to figure out when they last felt well and what happened, not just on the inside or what, virus they contracted or whatever it is, but what was happening in their social life, in their emotional life, in their spiritual life. The answer is somewhere in that history, and you have to be a good historian to get some feel. Because, the other interesting thing about taking a history is that you find clues about what the patient thinks is important, not necessarily what the clinician thinks is important.
Can you give us an example of that?
I had a patient who had early stage cervical cancer. And you'd think, of course, that it's about the early stage cervical cancer that she'd want to do something about. And actually, it was about the shame that surrounded the fact that she had a virus, which was a risk factor for the cervical cancer, and her relationship with her husband because of the shame that she had around her body. That's what we wound up spending our time on, as opposed to the cervical cancer itself, And there are quite a few examples of this, I would imagine, where we think the pathology is the problem. And sometimes the biopsychosocial side to things is what the patient would like dealt with first. That I'm not saying that their cancer or their disease process is not important to them. Of course it is, right? But we need to stop imposing what we think is important on patients. The patient is the most important person in that consulting room. That's the whole point of patient-centered care.
You've hit quite an important point, which is this whole idea. And I've had guests on the podcast that have said that cancer is caused by stress, cancer is caused by X, Y, and Z. And they weren't physicians. They were maybe psychotherapists. So as a physician, would you say, how much, let's take, for example, this patient, did her cancer go into remission after you dealt with?
There were so many things involved. So she was seeing an obs-gynae, right, who was treating her for her cancer as well. She did go into remission. So how much of it is due to the LETS procedure or whatever it is, or how much is it, is due to the emotional healing? Who knows? The most important thing is that the patient heals. And I will leverage anything to get that patient better. So I think the question here is about how important is stress in the pathophysiology of disease? And the answer is very. Can you quantify that? Not really. But there is not one person, not one doctor, I don't think, who will tell you that stress has nothing to do with it. Now, the other interesting thing here is that everyone always goes towards those psychological stressors when they're talking about stress. But that's not the only stress that we experience, right? Some stressors are not even objectively stressors. What I mean by that is, so for example, we're here in a podcasting studio with bright white lights on our face. And I'll tell you now that our bodies, our brains, our eyes, at this very moment in time is stressed. Our mitochondria is stressed. The large amount of blue light contained in this bright white light shining on my face right now is affecting the protein complexes in my mitochondria, increasing reactive oxygen species, and my antioxidant defense capacity has to work a little bit over time right now to deal with this. That's a stress. So I think psychological stress is a little bit done. Everybody knows that. Stress is not pleasant. Understanding the different types of stress, eustress and the toxic stress and the stress that helps build resilience, like all these things, I'm sure that other people can elucidate much better than me. I guess maybe we could go down talking about stressors that aren't obvious. Stressors that one day are a stress and the next day actually are fine. Because it depends on your threshold, and your threshold changes. It changes every day, and for women, it changes in a month, depending on our hormones and our cycles. So a woman is better able to cold plunge, for example, during her follicular phase, as opposed to her luteal phase. When she cold plunges in her luteal phase, she's more likely to experience uncomfortable stress that the body doesn't like. So it's no such thing as one prescription, broad strokes across the population, or one prescription for you every day. No, it changes, right? Our thresholds, our capacity changes. In dealing with that, we then have to understand that interoception, the ability of oneself to understand what's happening in here, your mind, your heart, and your body is really important. So some days you can say, I have great capacity to deal with my family's psychological stress or my family's quibbling. And other days you go, you know what? I don't have that capacity. And so I'm not going to get involved. And I'm going to do something, that is in the realms of self-care or whatever. It's understanding yourself and understanding that you can say no, you can dip in, that things change. And as doctors, putting on patients a bit of a one-size-fits-all model, which has unfortunately been what we've been dealt with in the last few decades, has no place now. Everyone's talking about personalized medicine. Everyone's talking about patient-centered care. That has to really mean something. You got to meet the patients where they are. And that's why psychoneuroimmunology is so important.
The needle has moved so fast. I think it's crazy to think that maybe a few years ago, if I said generational trauma or generational stress was a thing, people would have looked at me like, who the fuck's this woo-woo guy?
Yeah,
and now it's become the norm, generational stress. What's going on right now in the Middle East? We are on the brink of whatever. How I feel in myself because of what my parents and grandparents went through in that region, it's crazy how it affects me, and also just seeing it's happening at such I can't even begin to imagine on how many different levels of your kind of stress Venn diagram and everything it's affecting, right? Because there's so many, it's so complex. So maybe if you can just map out all the different types of stressors, that would be fantastic.
Okay. So we can deal with stress as a categorization, right? Maybe from external and internal. Okay. So external stresses are obviously stressors that are not happening necessarily in your body, but which are going to affect you socially, psychologically, emotionally, whatever. And the knock-on or the domino effect is going to make you at some point feel it physiologically. Okay, your hormones, your cortisol is going to increase, all that kind of stuff. So those are your external stressors. And then you have your internal stressors. And that is, as I was saying before, the kind of light diet you have or food diet that you have, or your circadian rhythm and how you sleep. And it's going to change the physiology. And that physiology at a cellular level is going to cause a stress to your antioxidant system and to your autonomic nervous system and to your mitochondria. And that's the mechanisms for aging, right? Where you have these reactive oxygen species and they're not quelled appropriately or enough, and things start to slowly deteriorate. That's one way to look at it. Other ways to categorize stress is from a subjective perspective. Your idea of stress is not my idea of stress. You can't eat tomatoes. I can eat tomatoes. You can't eat tomatoes because you may have a histamine intolerance issue. And the thing is, some people can't eat tomatoes on days where they're stressed at work, and all of a sudden the tomatoes makes their mouth a little bit itchy because there is high histamine in tomatoes, for example. And other days when they're on holiday, they can have a few slices of tomato, no problem. So then it's what you think is a stress for you, the subjective experience, the lived experience. Another way to look at stress is how your threat detection systems in your body is perceiving an input. So what I mean by that is, because our bodies have been forged by millions of years of evolution, the primary driver is procreation. But before procreation, we need survival. Everything else, sense of purpose and community, that's all cherry on top. We need to make sure that we survive and then procreate. Yeah. Okay. How does your body, how does your mind perceive what is a threat to survival? It uses a threat detection system. A threat detection system can be categorized in many different ways, but a framework I have is about the fact that it's a resource allocation strategy. You can't, or the body really doesn't want to be reacting to anything and everything that may very well be a stress, right? Because you're going to be wasting resources. So it actually asks the different parts of your body that are perceiving these inputs. I know you see a threat, advanced glycation end product. Does the transient receptor potential ion channel also see a threat? Both of you do? Okay, this is more likely to be a real threat rather than just an isolated event or whatever it is. And so how the threat detection systems perceive an input and then react to that input means that whatever it is that triggered it is a stress. An example from clinic is this. You can have a patient who experiences a IBS or gut uncomfortable kind of spasm or whatever it is to a particular food. And that food is going to upset the system because the system has been trained to see that particular food as a threat. And I've seen this in some patients in a very odd kind of way, in that if you eat something whilst you are very psychologically, emotionally stressed, and your system is looking for something to tag for why you have all this epinephrine and cortisol running through your body, it will tag that food because it'll go, maybe it was that. And if you consistently eat that particular food with the stress situation, before you know it, you actually develop an intolerance. So in the allergy clinic that I used to work with in Australia, we figure out, which of these foods, it's not a true allergy. It's not an IgE-driven allergy. And we figure IgE. So it's a type of immune component, right? Where it's a innate kind of allergy, like the peanut allergies or the seafood allergies. Okay. So this is more intolerances. And then we help your system to increase its threshold for that particular food and redevelop a bit of a relationship or connection to that food. And then before you know it, people can start eating the foods that they were intolerant to because their system no longer sees it as a threat.
Let's take it a bit, let's zoom out and just look at that just in general, like how because in the end, we're trying to protect ourselves. We're trying to survive. Just you describing what you just described, I'm like, wow, we are so smart. Like the amount of layers of, okay, like our brain being able to tell ourselves, like, this is clearly a threat, but it's not as strong as X, Y, and Z. And it goes back to the Maslow hierarchy of needs, right?
Actually, can we talk about that very quickly?
Sure, go
so
for it.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the base of it, it's security and physiologic needs, right? And then you work your way up to all the other stuff that's that we've been discussing. There's a 3S model for that, where it's security, social, and stimulation, right? And this one takes into account that people's need for stimulation, whether it's mental or emotional or physical, that bubble changes, right? And not everybody requires hardcore security needs before they're able to sort of move on to the next step in the ladder, the next rung of the ladder. There are people who are very rigid, who've got low thresholds for uncertainty. They need bigger security bubbles.
Yeah.
The 3S model is interesting, not just that the 3 different bubbles change sizes, but the survival percentage of that security bubble maintains quite a large percentage, because survival in all iterations of the 3S bubbles, right, is always going to be paramount. So you do, your ancient brain, your adaptive brain, always still prioritizes survival, but maybe not necessarily the other things of security. So I'm a digital nomad, and I don't have a home, right? And I have a very high threshold for uncertainty. But if anything happens that my brain perceives as a threat to my survival, it still gets very upset, even though I have very high thresholds for uncertainty.
Like what?
Okay, so circadian rhythm issues. So when I'm moving between time zones, I can usually tolerate that quite well. Recently, because I can travel so well, I actually gave myself less buffer between getting off the plane and getting on stage. My brain was not happy at all. And I have not seen it scream as much as it did because I didn't give it that buffer. Now, of course, just like with any patient, you ask what else is going on in your life, right? And with me, it's perimenopause or hormonal stuff as well, and whatever it is, the combo wasn't great. So I was like, okay, a lot of what I understand and then translate is also in part lived experience, and I think it's very important for me to say, the more I learn, the more I know, the more I practice, the more I know I don't know. I'm at this point now where I have a couple of frameworks which I'm speaking about on stage. And every time I speak about the framework, I learn something new. Whether it's I'm on stage and I say something and I go, or if someone comes up to me and tells me, their story, and I'm like, I didn't realize that, or I hadn't thought of it that way. And there are quite a few other psychoneuroimmunologists who will obviously come to my talk or whatever, and they want to discuss things colleague to colleague. Always learn something new.
I would be worried if your framework wasn't changing.
Yeah.
Jordan Schlane talks about the pessimistic meta-induction theory, which is the idea that science is the most accurate version of the truth today, but doesn't mean it's going to be accurate tomorrow or in a few weeks, and it shouldn't be accurate because we're moving the needle so fast.
Yes. I have one framework called the Network of Threat Detection Systems, which is essentially a resource allocation strategy, making sure that there's coherence in the system. If one system sees a threat, that other systems are seeing a threat, and therefore that is a true threat. The other framework is called 9 Ancient Survival Threats. And it's how the survival brain perceives these modern inputs. And when it can't really explain it because the animal is so heightened as far as the nervous system goes, or there's so much cortisol or epinephrine running through it, ancient scripts start to play out. And when I first started developing this framework, trying to explain emerging syndromes in my patients, I started off with 5 ancient survival threats. And in 3 years, it went from 5 to 6, 7, 8, and 9. And I might actually go back to 8 because I'm constantly reorganizing it. But that's what science is, right? As you said, it changes.
So tell me how the ancient brain can understand how to walk and thrive in this modern world.
The thrive part, I don't know if I can help you with, because this is about survival. So essentially it's this, right? You went back, you were asking before about stressors. So think about it in a day, right? You slept overnight on a bed that's not grounded. From an evolutionary perspective, we were sleeping on the ground. And what does grounded mean? It means drawing electrons from the earth. Now you're sleeping on a bed that's not earthed, so you're not getting electrons from the ground overnight. You're sleeping on pillows, and a lot of the time it might change your head angle so much that it impedes the flow of the cerebral spinal fluid. You're sleeping on a mattress that's probably got flame retardant in it. And these chemicals, they make a difference. You're in a room that's got air conditioning, which means that the air is dry and some temperature that may not necessarily reflect what's happening in the outside regular world. You're sleeping in polyester sheets or 20% polyester sheets, which aren't a natural material, and your skin receptors pick up on that. There was actually a paper that showed the electromagnetic sort of resonance of different fibers, and linen, cotton, wool had very high vibration, basically, and that synthetic materials did not. Then you wake up and you brush your teeth with a fluoride toothpaste, when I'm sure that there are plenty of people who will still say that fluoride is very important for teeth health. But I can tell you one thing, nobody is running around with a fluoride deficiency. Then you eat your breakfast, which is going to be some sort of probably processed food. And a processed food means that it's usually high in advanced glycation end products. An advanced glycation end product, or an AGE, is where you non-enzymatically bind a sugar to a protein or fat. Ultra-processed foods, processed foods tend to have very high concentration of these advanced glycation end products, which, when it binds onto the receptor, actually turns on a inflammatory cascade. Then you put, oh my God, this is still before 8 a.m. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then you're putting these products on your face and on your body and in your hair that with these artificial scents and chemicals and all the rest of it. And it's all just paper cuts. Does it actually make a real difference to you or me? No. Or does it? Right? These tiny paper cuts, you can bleed out from a million paper cuts. Right? And your system gets stressed because it's one thing and it's another, and then it's another, and then it's another. And then before you know it, you have Hashimoto's or some sort of autoimmune, you've got a bit of anxiety, depression, you've got issues with your sleep, you know, your tolerance for your mother-in-law is not as high as it used to be, whatever. Like these little things, which everyone considers to be normal in this day and age, stems from a threshold that's been breached, stems from a lack of stress resilience, stems from your body asking you to please calm the farm. And so we do our best, right? People are doing the breath work and the exercise and all the rest of it. But like you said, you got to take a bit of a step back and look at it a little bit more broadly and mitigate where you can and accept what you can't. But knowledge is power. So where you know that this may be perceived as a threat, you can do something about it. So the framework that I came up with was essentially, after observing lots of my patients, my complex chronic condition patients, and seeing that, well, first of all, the most important lesson derived from the framework is that your body is trying to protect you. Symptoms are literally just a way for your body to try and talk to you. Depression is also known as sickness-like behavior. It's a way for your body to get you into a cave because that's the safest place for you. I don't know why you've got so much cortisol. I don't know why you've got so much epinephrine through your system. I don't know why your autonomic nervous system, your sympathetic drive is so wound up. Maybe it's a predator. Maybe it's a famine. Maybe it's the plague. It's something. I don't know what it is. So let's get you in the cave and I'll figure it out. That's depression. You know what anxiety is? Anxiety is hypervigilance. What? Who? Where? When? Oh, is it this? Is it that? Because I'm not going to miss a trick for you. Don't you worry. There's something not right in the environment, but I'll figure it out. I'll watch out for it because I'm trying to protect you. Your body's trying to help you. Generally speaking, patients who come in the door are not broken. They don't need fixing. They need holding. And when patients realize that their body isn't out to get them and that they aren't broken, you'll see a change, just a drop, like what you're just doing now, just a drop in their their heart rate and their blood pressure.
I cannot shout about that more. What you just said, your body is not out to get you. We're so often, I think, people with anxiety, and I remember when I had really bad anxiety when I was younger, you just think, why is this happening to me? And it's beautiful when you realize your body is just so complicated in the best possible way. It's trying to tell you something.
Yeah.
The body keeps the score.
The body keeps the score.
Yeah.
Exactly that. I'm actually going through my own issues at the moment. Perimenopause has not been kind when you couple it with the jet lag and not having a home. And, I'm going through the hypervigilance, the anxiety, and I need to keep reminding myself, okay, my body's just trying to talk to me, And then you realize, oh, okay, I have to actually make space and be still to listen to my body, which I'm not very good at staying still. So, I'm constantly learning too. So the framework is called 9 Ancient Survival Threats. Now, ask me in 6 months if it's still 9, it could be 8, it could be 10, who knows, right? But it's a developing beast. So the 9 ancient survival threats are: 1, the veil. The veil is all about sensory integrity. What is that? We all have 8 senses of the body, right? So the 5 that everybody knows about, that's your sight, your smell, your hearing, your taste, and your touch. And then the 3 that people may not know: proprioception, where your joints are in relation to other joints. Vestibular, where you are with relation to the ground. And interoception, do you know when you're hungry or cold or hot? And when the 8 senses are not coherent, the body perceives that the animal, you, might have an issue. Now, will it allow you to keep walking around in public? Sure, right? But if enough sensory decoherence is perceived, it's going to try and get you in that cave. So the example that I use a lot is like when you're at the beach, which you and I both love, right? You're at the beach and you've got sunglasses on. So your eyes are not getting the full spectrum of light that your skin is feeling. And your body goes, is there something wrong with this animal? What's wrong with its vision? And you know that sunlight on your skin, the opsins in your skin, the non-visual photoacceptors, the non-visual photoreceptors in your skin, is it actually perceiving the full spectrum of light, or have you got sunscreen on? So it's not perceiving this, not perceiving that, and it's like, what's wrong with the animal's skin? And you can see the sand and you can see the surf, but you know what? Your feet, which by the way is always meant to be in contact with the ground pretty much, right? It can't feel the sand. It can't feel the surf. Do you know why? Because you're wearing shoes. And all of a sudden, you've accidentally introduced decoherence into the system. For you and I, no big deal. Paper cuts, whatever. But when people are sick, it's something that is really easy for me to try and reintroduce coherence into the system. So I do pay attention to those things. So that's the veil. Next, we have the toxin archetype. And as you can imagine, it's chemicals and toxins. And so from an evolutionary perspective, this would be your rot, your mold, black mold, right? Your smoke, things that are going to alert your system to stay away, go away. And now we have all these wonderful chemicals that our body don't recognize, and it's going to make you upset. I mean, we used to have something called multiple chemical sensitivities. And so this is where patients will get migraines from perfume, for example, or whatever. It's now called, being recategorized, and it's called TILT, toxicant-induced loss of tolerance, usually from overexposure to pesticides or something like that. And all of a sudden, your neuroimmune system just goes haywire. The debris archetype, where you have a foreign body in your system, like a splinter, let's just say, and your body tries hard to get rid of it, and if it can't get rid of it, it'll wall it off. So these are your fibroses, your scars, your cysts, and that kind of stuff. The elements archetype, So this is extremes of temperature. I made mention before about the fact that women have to be careful. Menstruating women have to be careful when they cold plunge, how cold that water is, for example. And the use of air conditioning and humidifiers or dehumidifiers, they change the environment, and your body can get a little bit upset, especially when there's a lack of coherence with what's happening outside your cave, your home, your office.
Let's talk about that, because there's so much attention right now on cold plunging and saunas. And it just feels like this, I do it religiously. I love it. And I feel good. But I'm like, how good is this really for me?
I think the evidence is very good for it. For sauna, I mean, the Finnish sauna study from 2015, there's a linear correlation between sauna and a decrease in all-cause mortality, decrease in cardiovascular incidence, and so on and so forth. Knowing the mechanisms of how heat works or cold works, that's also really important. Okay, so heat is going to induce heat shock proteins, which is a chaperone protein in the cells. It's going to clean things up. It's going to induce antioxidant pathways in the body like NRF2. I mean, we know these mechanisms. Now, you take a sauna virgin and you throw them into a sauna and you lock the door. I think everybody knows that that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
So things may be good for you, but you have to build up to it. You have to have a capacity for it. You have to have the threshold for it. I used to have severe asthma growing up. I could not do steam rooms or saunas for that matter until maybe about 10 years ago when I sorted out my asthma for good. I don't even have a Ventolin now. And I slowly increased my exposures to sauna over time. And those are the kinds of personalized protocols that I would more advocate for, as opposed to, is this good or bad for me? Well,
Gotcha. Yeah.
Where are you in your life kind of thing. Then there's the famine archetype. And this is where you have...
Famine.
So don't forget, these are ancient survival
I know
threats.
this archetype a lot.
Ah, okay. Well,
because my parents are from Lebanon. So just my great-grandparents, they went through the Great Famine, which killed half of the country, So it's, I regularly talk about this with my Indian friends and other friends, maybe Irish friends who went through potato famine and all that. Well, not them personally, but they kind of did.
But generational, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
so it's
because
in
it
their
actually
cells.
turns on certain genes and you'll find that grandchildren of people who went through famine are more likely to put on weight.
Yeah, this is a big thing, right? So with me, it's like, I'll eat nothing during the day, I'll fast. Then all of a sudden I eat certain food types and I just go on a rampage like no other. People say to me, well, you're fasting. Like, how can you not be in a calorie deficit if you're only eating for like 2 hours a day? And I'm like, I can eat all my calories in 10 minutes. I don't. So.
So actually, let's talk about you, if you don't mind,
please.
in context of the famine archetype. So you brought up a very interesting point, and that was about intergenerational DNA SNP changes due to actual famines, right? But what I'm talking about is modern day analogs, things that happen now, which then trigger a part of your brain that goes, oh my God, is this a famine? What I'm talking about is calorie-rich, nutrient-poor food, ultra-processed foods, for example. Right? You can have all these calories and no vitamins, no minerals, no nutrients in it. Your brain starts to get very upset. And it goes, is there something wrong with this animal? Is there something wrong with the environment? Are we in a famine? Or you can fast, right? Intermittent fasting. That's good for everybody, isn't it? Is it? So if your brain is already primed to be on the lookout for a famine, and you deprive it of calories for 16 hours a day, because that's what some of the big biohackers are doing and it's good for health, your brain goes, oh my God! And it actually turns on the propensity to double down on putting on weight because it doesn't want to miss a trick. It wants to protect you, especially in context of your generational trauma.
Makes a lot of sense.
The other thing is, women, for example, fasting, intermittent fasting, they can lose their periods because we are not smaller men. And there have been books now written about how to fast like a girl. And you know what? The way we fast changes during a month. Because when our body is trying to increase the endometrial lining, because hopefully we're getting pregnant, right? It doesn't need you fasting, because the signal you're selling to the brain is we're in famine. There's a problem. Now, does everybody lose their period when they fast, intermittent fast, dry fast, wet fast, whatever it is? No, of course not. It depends on your thresholds. It depends on what else is happening in your life. And that's why you got to have a holistic view on these things. But yes, I have seen patients lose their periods because of intermittent fasting. The last three are the radiation, which is the things that you can't see. And so that's going to be electromagnetic fields, UV, which is why, I don't jump up and down about it, but I am very pointed with my patients about excessive exposures to Wi-Fi, 5G, 4G, so on and so forth. The beast archetype, and that is the potential for violence or some sort of predator threat. And this is literally just your body saying, hey, hang on a second, why have you got so much epinephrine through your system? Why are you in fight, flight? Is there something I should be worried about? Where is the saber-toothed tiger? And the last archetype is the plague. And of course, this is going to be your virus, your bacteria, your parasites, and so on and so forth.
How easy is it to measure these things? Like how?
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, tough.
Okay.
Tough, because this is more a framework trying to help patients see that a lot of their symptoms is actually their body trying to protect them.
Yeah, very interesting. So let's zoom in on 2025, where we're at. Your work, I'm sure, has evolved so much in the decades that you've been doing it, right? But where we're at right now, what are you seeing most? Like, what are the key stressors? And how do you think it's going to change as the world continues to evolve and move faster? And we have AGI and AI becoming more of a thing. And
that's a great question. Huge, though. Loneliness is a big problem. We're only 2 generations out of a nuclear family. So people used to have much smaller villages, communities. You'd live with your parents, your grandparents. The neighbors actually came around and helped. Your neighbors actually knew your name, right? Women who still do the majority of child rearing now, it wasn't that long ago where they had help.
Yeah.
And now we don't. And the domino effect on how a child's brain is developing in those first few formative years means that we're having adults who are less stress resilient. And what are the consequences of that for their children? Women are expected to do everything still, right? So we talked about child rearing and childbearing and blah, blah, blah. And then we were told that we could have it all. And that is making the money, climbing the corporate ladder, and we can. But there is always a price to pay. Can't have your cake and eat it too. And being that a lot of the literature, the research has always been on men, women are sort of, from a psychological, psychotherapy, counseling perspective, are still almost seen through this lens, this male-centric, male-dominant lens. But we're very different. We're very different. The feminine energy is chaotic and creative and wild if it's allowed to be who it needs to be. And the masculine, I'm broad stroking here all over the place, you understand, right? And the masculine is meant to be that safe space, that container. And we're not having that celebration of polarity anymore. I'm not even going to go down the transgender stuff and all that, but clearly there are issues with how we're perceiving our sex and sexuality and how we're understanding our roles with regards to each other as well. The other thing I would say is a big problem that I'm seeing is maybe too much information and then an over-reliance on all this information and this lack of self-trust, needing, right? Not wanting, needing to do those tests, needing to get that wearable data. It's not good. People don't trust their bodies. People don't trust themselves. And if you don't trust your body, don't trust yourself, you're more susceptible to, being taken in by the big influencers or the biohackers or the doctor. Like what I say is not going to resonate with everyone. What I say is not for everyone either. And I accept that. And I'm wrong a lot of the time too, because we all are. Right? We went to medical school. Our professors actually said to us, 50% of what you're learning in medical school is wrong. But we need to stop looking at all this as being right or wrong. This is dialogue. This is dialogue that needs to happen so that we can massage some semblance of truth for you that resonates with you, that sings to you, right? Too much information, I think, and we get paralyzed with choice.
How do we start the healing process? You're part of a few organizations. One of them is called sense.ai, looks at precision EEG. And then also you've explored plant medicine and a few other things as well. So
yeah, because it's about the different tools in the toolbox, right? Some tools are going to work for you and other tools aren't.
Yeah.
So when we're overly prescriptive or we are overly attached to an algorithm, that's when we're going to do damage to our patients, because we tell them what they should do, as opposed to inviting them up to the helm of the boat with you and then trying to figure out where to steer to.
Okay, so if someone comes to you, let's say you're having a very holistic approach to it. Let's say me. Let's use me as an example. I am a 33-year-old British Lebanese guy who's done quite a bit of work, quite intuitive when it comes to my body, but have explored quite a few things. What would you do with me?
Well, first we would be talking about, what do you want to get on top of, right? What would you like to get out of this session? What are your goals? And then we'd be going through your history. And, you could be someone who really enjoys exercise. So we're going to explore different types of movement, somatic therapies, exercise, really get into your proprioception, vestibular side to things, because what we're trying to find is the different roads that you enjoy, resonate with, that are going to feed you safety signals. Because people always think of it as like traditional medicine, or conventional medicine rather, has always been about patching. So you have this symptom and I'm going to give you a medication to quell that symptom, to silence that system. So that's patching. Patching can be helpful, but that doesn't solve why you're unwell or why you're, whatever, sick. Then you have to remove the triggers. So I mean, obviously I don't really know your story, but if certain things make you upset, certain things really get your sympathetic nervous system in overdrive, certain things make you hypervigilant, let's try and remove those if we can.
So let's give an example. I had a leg injury when I was 21. It's been traumatic, but I've gotten over most of it. Like how?
Which part of the leg?
Just the knee.
Okay.
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, the body is going to prioritize. In other words, it's going to get more upset the lower down the limb you go.
Okay.
So the ankle and the knee are going to be really important, because the ankle is a multi-directional joint, and the knee is going to propel you forward. And you're going to need those two to escape a saber-toothed tiger.
Well, brilliant. I've broken my ankle and I've...
Right. So this is something that I'd be talking to patients about. Okay. So just me telling you that, you're like, you can climb down a tree and break all your fingers, you can break your arm, all the rest of it, but you can still run away from a saber-toothed tiger. Yeah. Right? That's why your body prioritizes the lower down you go. So I definitely see patients where if they break their ankle, there seems to be a lot more trauma involved than if they broke their wrist. And it's also a bit of a triple whammy-ish kind of aspect to this, where if you break a joint on the same leg or same side, right, in more than one place, your body goes, there's something wrong with this animal. And it goes into overdrive. It needs to be hypervigilant because it has to protect you. There's something not quite right with you, right? So part of it may be looking yourself in the mirror without your clothes on, giving thanks to your body for everything it's done to you, done for you. The gratitude, right? The realizing that you can heal, you have healed, and slowly move your joints. Because the practice of Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, these slow static movements, it's not about stretching.
Yeah.
It's about feeding your brain as much data points as possible. Every time you move a joint, slowly, your brain is taking in information. And it's not just taking in information from a proprioceptive or vestibular perspective. It's taking in information about everything around you: the humidity, the sunlight, the pressures in the atmosphere. It's taking into account what's in your belly. It's taking into account how dry your mouth is. It's taking all these things because the brain is an iterative organ. Something called the free energy principle, which was developed by Professor Carl Friston at UCL. And that is, when you do a sport and you hit a ball over and over and over and over again, because every time you do it, it's different by just a tiny little factor. And the brain is it's banking all that information so that the next time, the 200,000th time that you hit that ball, it's able to draw from a big database, right, of all these different changes so that it can try to predict as best as possible. That's what has to happen with your leg. You need to slowly move it whilst you're looking at it, right? Because you got to take in as much information as possible. And before you know it, your brain is going to reconnect itself, the mind, to your body in a meaningful way.
So gratitude, slow movement, giving thanks. Okay.
Yeah.
Why being naked? Why is it seeing it as flesh?
Because you need to see it, right? Clothing is cloaking. Shoes are sensory deprivation chambers. The one thing that I do with my female patients who have got issues with their vulva or vagina or whatever it is to get them to look at themselves down there in the mirror, naked, to reconnect with themselves. Because many of us were brought up believing that, anything down there was dirty or not to be talked about or whatever it is. And then from a subconscious perspective, when you think of any part of you as broken or dirty or bad or whatever, that's a really damaging place to be for your mind, because everything about you is beautiful in and out.
Yeah.
And we all have to learn that lesson, me included.
Yeah, shame plays an interesting part in all of this.
What a low vibration emotion. As do you know Hawkins' levels of
vibrations? I know of it, but
shame, guilt, regret, very low vibration.
So apart from this, kind of viewing the body, like what other tools? I know plant medicine is such an obvious one for people to talk about, psychedelics and all this. What are other tools that someone can use today? So
I actually do or recommend to patients. So remember I was saying about removing the triggers is one, right? Patching is another, which we all know about. But increasing safety signals is one I talk a lot about. So plant medicines can be very helpful. Of course, they can, hot cold therapies, pulse electromagnetic field, red light therapy, supplements, blah. I'm so bored talking about it now. Because why do we go from 0 to 100 straight off the bat? Patients, and I've seen this, especially with my really complex chronic patients, cancer is the worst one, where I used to be part of the problem, right? Where, you should take this and do this and do this and do this, and you overwhelm the patient. And then they have FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. And then what does that do to their sympathetic nervous system? Because you can only heal in a parasympathetic state, in a rest and digest state. And when there's any part of you that's nervous, fearful, regretting, that's all sympathetic. That means that you're not in parasympathetic, which means that you're not healing, right? And so I don't want to be part of the problem anymore. I don't want to keep talking about things that are going to cost my patients money. Not everybody can afford it. So some of the things that I recommend to increase safety signals, right, apart from some really obvious things like hugging someone or communicating with a friend and laughing and all that kind of stuff, is looking at it from an evolutionary perspective, going into a wide open space. Why? Because only animals not afraid of being seen by an apex predator from a hill nearby is going to be able to go into a wide open space and stay there. You know why you're not afraid? Because you are apex. You're going to put your hands in a parasympathetic state, because this is a sympathetic state, hiding a weapon, putting, having your hands in a boxing stance. You're surrendering. So you're putting, just for those listening, you're putting them out? Yes. The palms are facing, palms facing up or out, right? This is a parasympathetic state. You are going to put your shoulders back, because when your shoulders are not back and they're hunched over, do you know what this is called? This is called boxer's stance. Right?
You're
And
looking to
boxer's
defend
stance,
yourself, yeah.
yes, it's a sympathetic state. So chin up, shoulders back. And then, of course, you're going to breathe through your nose, nice and slow. Do you know why? Because you do have the time. Because it is not famine. Because it is not winter. Because you are not being stalked by a saber-toothed tiger. Because you are safe. So you breathe in a safe way. Then you're going to prove to your body, you're going to prove that the veil works, sensory integrity works. And you're going to use your head to scan the horizon. Oh, look, I can use my head and I am able to surveil for threats if I wanted to. Not that I need to because we're safe, but I'm just showing you that we can. That's why our society, where all we do is stare at a phone and stare at a laptop, me included, by the way, right? This scares the heck out of our brain, because the brain goes, hey, you haven't looked around in a while. You know, is there you haven't seen if there is a saber-toothed tiger. I mean, there probably isn't, of course there is, but maybe. Are you sure? Right?
Yeah.
You scare the shit out of it. And then not only are you moving your head, but you're moving your eyes backwards and forwards, sweeping the horizon, because you're proving that you can surveil if you need to, right? And then you move your torso as well. Everything is just about feeding the brain information, doing everything nice and slow. That's why I also prescribe slow loving sex to my patients too.
Okay.
Right? Co-regulating with someone. Because when you have slow, loving, co-regulating sex, you're proving to your body that there isn't a saber-toothed tiger outside, right? That you have the time in spring to do this. So it's all about these free activities, behaviorisms that speak to a more ancient part of your body, you know, and it's free.
I would love to go into your crystal ball. It's a question I ask every time. The world is changing so fast. When you look at 2030, what do you see? What will the world look like?
That's actually a really sad question for me, because it seems exponential at the moment how sick my patients are getting, how sick the patients are that my colleagues are talking about. Things that are out of our control, right? Microplastics and pollution. And I want it to be that patients know that they can find sanctuary within themselves and within their social groups. But they have to want it. They have to do it. You know, it cannot be handed to you on a plate. It's not in a pill. It's not going to be your doctor doing something to you. You have to dig deep. It has to come from within. I was never really exposed to personal development or anything like that until very recently. And I went to a Tony Robbins event in December. And it was actually there that I met my partner. And he's been doing personal development since he was in his early 20s. He's streets ahead of me. The knowledge that man has when it comes to personal development and the different books and routes one can go down to try and foster optimism or stress resilience, whatever it is incredible. And I loved being in that room with all these thousands of other people at Date with Destiny, because everybody knew far more about this sort of stuff than I did. But that's really motivated me, you know. But I have to dig deep. I got to do it. I have to do the work. I have to do the reading. I have to do the meditation. And sometimes I am successful with that and sometimes I'm not. So in 2030, I see that those who try, they will fly. They will thrive. Because it's not necessarily the destination, right? You're never going to wake up and, you know, be a guru or whatever it is. But being on that journey and knowing that those tools are available and trying them out and figuring out what works for you, that's the important part. And for those patients and those people who don't yet realize, I worry. I do. So I think it's, you know, like podcasters like yourself, influencers like yourself, doctors like me, and much better learned colleagues, you know, it's our responsibility to tell patients that they have the power.
That is so important. They have the power.
They have the
because
power.
I think the issue is that you get a lot of entrepreneurs who will start saying to the world, well, you can do it if you want. And the question I always ask to myself and to them, it's, well, there's this difference between people that are high agency. And sometimes it's less about being high agency or low agency and more about this self-awareness piece. But it's not, I don't blame anyone. There's so much noise and distraction. This whole world has been set up for so many people to fail. I would say I'm a high agency person, and I still binge on social media on everything. And I know all these people do as well.
But all these things are opportunities for us to recognize ourselves, see our flaws, and then work on something, right?
We need to create a tool or a framework that allows people to increase self-awareness, whatever it is, right? It's to become more aware of.
But the minute that door is open, you can't close it. So the minute you are a self-aware person, it's like a muscle.
Yeah.
You just become more aware, full stop, end of story, And I think that when it comes to medicine, because that I feel I can really speak to health, wellness and medicine, we practitioners and the patients that come and see us, we need to stop with the over-prescriptions. It doesn't matter if the prescription is a supplement. It's no different to a drug. We need to stop yoking patients to things. Patients need to realize that they have far more agency, and they need to stop also looking for that magic pill, because it complicates the journey. When you don't realize that there's so much to learn, and you kind of need to stumble sometimes to learn it. You need to fail to learn it. You need to fall off the wagon to learn it. It's just...
So I just had Simon Alexander on the podcast, and we talked a lot about the rock bottom, right? Rock bottom is that moment for so many people to bounce back and to have that journey after. I really see that, and my mission is that everyone can physically and mentally thrive in peace by 2030, actually by 2035. I also believe that human habit is something that's quite stuck at times. And I think GLP-1s have shown that we can change people's habits if we give them a little push, or quite a big push. I want to end on a hopeful note. Is there something in the next few years that you think can change the path away from the suffering that you're seeing with a lot of your patients and in other clinics?
So, yes, actually, because there is a movement now back towards community. You see it in the dating apps, right? Before, even just 2 or 3 years ago, it was all swipey. And now it's more like Time Left, for example, where it's about coming to a table and having dinner together or not. Because we realize that the swipey, staying behind your phone or your computers doesn't work. So there is this now movement back towards community. And the rise of members clubs is another aspect to that. Team sports on the rise is another aspect to that. Patients being involved in shared consults is also something that's happening in medicine. So usually you do a one-on-one, doctor to patient. And now there are more doctors doing shared consults where there are 2, 3, 4, 5 patients in the room. Because a lot of these disease processes, you kind of talk about the same thing, right, in the beginning. So that's happening more and more. So I think that because we have this societal consciousness moving, wanting, yearning for more community, and that we are kind of driving towards that, in part by the help of entrepreneurs, who are giving the community, giving the people what they want, and that is, these social clubs or whatever it is. I think that's going to be really helpful, actually.
So let's talk a bit about quantum medicine, like what even that means, where to start with that all.
Okay, well, up until now, when we're talking in terms of medicine, right, we're talking biochemistry. We're talking about receptors and molecules binding to those receptors, and then there's a cascade effect and so on and so forth. That's all Newtonian physics. Quantum medicine or quantum biology is that aspect of medicine where quantum forces are at play. So the mitochondria is a perfect example of that. The mitochondria is what's known as the powerhouse of the cell. It does a hell of a lot more than that, but let's just keep it simple for the moment. And how the mitochondria makes energy, ATP, is that there are a series of protein complexes in the inner membrane of the mitochondria. And lo and behold, you get energy at the end of it using substrates from the citric acid cycle, the Krebs cycle. The main mechanism with how energy ATP is made in the mitochondria is that with these substrates from the Krebs cycle, you take an electron out and you quantum tunnel the electron through the protein complexes. You quantum tunnel a proton, H+, into the intermembrane space so that you wind up with a proton gradient, which then drives 6 protons down the ATP synthase to make energy ATP. These are all quantum phenomena. The 4 protein complexes in the inner membrane of the mitochondria are light acceptors. They're non-visual light acceptors. That's why red light can be very beneficial. Red light and infrared work on protein complex 4. Cytochrome C oxidase. Blue light can be detrimental when it oversaturates the protein complexes and hinders their activity. So there are lots of other sort of quantum aspects to the body, and essentially it's energy. And energy seems so woo, right, in medicine. However, bone, fascia, collagen, tendons, ligaments, they're all piezoelectric, which means that they convert one form of energy into another. That's how resistance exercise works for osteoporosis. As you're working against resistance, you're actually changing pressure or mechanical energy into another form of energy, which is going to turn on, osteoblastic work, which is making more bone, or you're going to turn on growth factors or whatever it is. Light, sound, these are all forms of energy. And when we know how to harness that, we know how to use it, especially with our modern technology, they can be methods of healing.
Olivia, thank you so much for your time. I think this is such an important conversation, how we start to understand stress and making people aware of just the complexity of stress and to be kinder to self. So often the lack of compassion for self just because we think of stress as something that we've done wrong. Actually, so often it's just completely out of our control as well. So thank you, and thank you for your work as well.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
If you want to know what tomorrow has in store like I do, you definitely want to listen to our recent episode where I talked to Peter Diamandis about a future where we could live forever. Thank you so much.